I'm Samantha, 29 years old, and never in my wildest dreams did I imagine becoming CEO of a Fortune 500 company while my parents still thought I was wasting my potential. For years, they worshipped my sister Elizabeth, the golden child destined for medical greatness, while my business ambitions were treated as childish fantasies. Then came that unbelievable moment when Richard, the company chairman, placed his hand on my shoulder and proudly announced, "I couldn't be prouder if she were my own son." What happened next changed everything. Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments, hit subscribe, and stay with me as I reveal how a lifetime of being second best prepared me for the greatest comeback story ever. Growing up in Wellesley, an affluent Boston suburb with pristine lawns and colonial houses, I was always aware of the expectations that came with being a Warren. Our family had a certain reputation to uphold. My father, Harold, was a renowned cardiovascular surgeon whose name appeared regularly in medical journals. My mother, Catherine, a former Miss Massachusetts who had gracefully transitioned into organizing charity galas, was known for her impeccable taste and social connections. Together, they created a world where excellence wasn't just encouraged, it was the baseline. And then there was Elizabeth, my older sister by 3 years. From the moment she entered high school, it was clear she was the physical embodiment of everything my parents valued. With her perfect posture, academic brilliance, and natural charm, Elizabeth seemed designed to follow my father's footsteps into medical greatness. She won science fairs with projects on cardiac tissue regeneration while still in 10th grade. Her bedroom gradually transformed into a shrine of academic awards, athletic trophies, and community service certificates. I was different. Not rebellious, not troubled, just different. While Elizabeth dissected frogs with surgical precision, I was designing mock stock portfolios and reading business biographies under my covers with a flashlight. At 13, I drafted my first business plan for a neighborhood tech support service. At 15, I presented my father with a detailed analysis of how his medical practice could improve its billing efficiency. "That's cute, Samantha," he'd said, patting my head without looking at the spreadsheets that had taken me weeks to prepare. "But the business world will eat you alive. It's not for sensitive girls like you." My mother was gentler, but no less dismissive. "Darling, why not focus on something more suitable? Business is so cutthroat. Perhaps marketing? Or event planning, like me?" Family dinners became a stage for Elizabeth's accomplishments. Each evening followed the same script. Elizabeth scored highest on her organic chemistry exam. Elizabeth got accepted to volunteer at Boston General. Elizabeth's professor thinks she could publish her research as an undergraduate. My news winning the school's economics competition, getting selected for a young entrepreneur's workshop, launching a successful online resale business was acknowledged with polite nods before conversation swiftly returned to Elizabeth's latest triumph. The contrast between our 16th birthdays crystallized everything. Elizabeth received a brand new Audi to get to her hospital volunteering safely, along with a gold stethoscope that had belonged to our grandfather. 3 years later, I unwrapped practical gifts, a planner, professional clothes for whatever office job you end up in, and a self-help book about finding your purpose. The message was clear: Elizabeth's path warranted investment, mine required correction. That night, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and made a private promise. They'll see. Someday, they'll all see. Mrs. Keller, my high school economics teacher, became my first true believer. After class one day, she kept me behind to discuss my analysis of a case study. "You have a natural mind for business strategy, Samantha," she said, looking at me with an intensity no one in my family ever had. "This isn't just academic talent. You see patterns and opportunities others miss." Those words sustained me through countless family events where I sat quietly while relatives asked Elizabeth about her medical aspirations and me about whether I had a boyfriend yet. I began living a compartmentalized life, the agreeable daughter at home who gradually stopped sharing her ambitions, and the driven strategist who stayed up creating business models and market analyses that nobody else would ever see. By senior year, Elizabeth was already in her second year at Harvard Medical School, maintaining a perfect GPA while somehow finding time to date the handsome son of a hospital administrator. Meanwhile, I applied to business schools in secret, knowing my parents would see it as a waste of my intelligence. When I got early acceptance to the Wharton School of Business with a partial scholarship, I finally gathered the courage to tell them. Business school? My father didn't look up from his journal. I suppose it's better than no direction at all. My mother sighed. We'll support you, of course, darling. Though I always thought you'd make such a lovely event coordinator. Their reluctant financial support came with a constant refrain. Elizabeth's medical school is expensive, but at least we know it's an investment in her future. The unspoken implication hung in the air. Money toward my education might as well be tossed into the wind. I packed for college with a mixture of excitement and determination. In my suitcase, beneath carefully folded clothes, I tucked a notebook filled with business ideas and market analyses that would eventually form the foundation of my career, one that my family couldn't begin to imagine. Wharton was like stepping into an alternate universe where ambition like mine wasn't just tolerated but celebrated. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by people who didn't look puzzled when I talked about market penetration strategies or venture capital. Still, the financial disparity in my parents' support remained a constant reminder of their priorities. My tuition checks always arrived with notes about tightening our belts, while Elizabeth's medical education received no such qualifiers. During my freshman orientation, I met Jennifer Patel, a brilliant, outspoken girl from Seattle with dreams of revolutionizing sustainable technology. Within minutes of conversation, we recognized in each other that same hungry determination. Over late-night study sessions and countless cups of terrible dining hall coffee, Jennifer became the first person who truly believed in my vision without qualification. You're going to run a company someday, she stated matter-of-factly during finals week of our first semester. And I want stock options when you do. While my parents' financial support covered tuition, it left little for anything else. I took jobs at the campus bookstore, the alumni call center, and eventually as a teaching assistant for introductory business courses. Every spare dollar went into my first real business venture, a small e-commerce platform connecting local artisans with consumers seeking handmade goods. The site wasn't revolutionary, but it taught me invaluable lessons about digital marketing, user experience, and vendor relationships. Elizabeth's life, meanwhile, continued its perfect trajectory. Her engagement to Thomas, a fourth-year neurosurgery resident, became the focal point of family conversations for months. My mother called weekly with updates about venues, flowers, and dress fittings. When I tried steering conversations toward my growing business, which had just turned its first modest profit, responses were predictably brief. That's nice, dear. Did I tell you Elizabeth's future mother-in-law is flying in from London next week to help with the wedding planning? Dating proved complicated. College relationships often faltered when faced with my unwavering focus. You love your spreadsheets more than me, complained one boyfriend after I missed his fraternity formal to finalize a business pitch. Perhaps he wasn't entirely wrong. The few men who weren't intimidated by my ambition often tried channeling it to their benefit, suggesting I'd make an amazing supporter for their own career goals. During junior year Thanksgiving, the division between my path and my family's expectations erupted into open conflict. Elizabeth and Thomas arrived wearing matching cashmere sweaters, bearing news of her prestigious research fellowship. After 30 minutes of celebration and toast after toast to her success, my father turned to me with that familiar look of vague disappointment. And what about you, Samantha? Still playing with your little website? Something in me snapped. My little website generated $40,000 in revenue last quarter and is projecting 60% growth next year. A heavy silence fell over the dining room. Well, my father finally said, swirling his wine, let's hope this business phase runs its course soon. You're wasting your potential on pipe dreams when you could be building something meaningful like your sister. My mother quickly jumped in, her voice coated with artificial sweetness. Samantha has always been our sensitive one. Perhaps business is simply too aggressive for her nature. There's still time to consider graduate programs in communications or human resources. I excused myself from the table and cried silently in the bathroom, torn between rage and a desperate desire for validation I knew would never come. Graduation day should have been triumphant. I was among the top 10% of my class, had secured a coveted position at a rising tech company in San Francisco, and my e-commerce venture had been acquired by a larger platform for a sum that, while modest in business terms, paid off my student loans entirely. Yet as we gathered for family photos, all conversation centered around Elizabeth's recent honors at medical school and whether she would specialize in cardiology like our father or forge her own path in neurology. The single bright spot was meeting Michael Anderson at a post-graduation party. Tall, with thoughtful eyes and a quiet confidence, he was beginning a management role at a sustainable energy company. Unlike others I dated, Michael asked questions about my business strategies and actually listened to the answers. Our connection was immediate and deep. For 3 wonderful months, we dated intensely before my job took me across the country. San Francisco is where the opportunities are, I explained as we sat in his car outside my parents' house the night before my departure. This position gives me access to the networks and experience I need. Michael took my hand. Then you have to go. Your dreams matter, Samantha. They always have. His validation meant everything, but even the strongest connections struggle against 3,000 miles and the pressures of demanding careers in their early stages. Our relationship became another casualty of my ambition, fading slowly through increasingly sporadic phone calls until we mutually acknowledged the inevitable end. As I packed my apartment for the move west, my mother called with news that Elizabeth had been selected for an elite surgical residency program. Your father and I are just bursting with pride, she gushed. When she finally asked about my plans, her response to hearing about my new job was a concerned, California is so far away. You can always come home if things don't work out, darling. I boarded the plane to San Francisco with a heart full of determination and a nagging voice in my head wondering if they might be right after all, if I was chasing something beyond my reach. That doubt would follow me like a shadow through my early career, even as I began proving them wrong with every step forward. Silicon Valley in 2016 remained very much a man's world, despite all the talk of progress and disruption. Artemis Technologies, where I'd been hired as a product development specialist, projected an image of meritocracy that daily realities often contradicted. My immediate supervisor, Thomas Harding, embodied every challenge I would face in those early years. A Stanford MBA with a network built through fraternity connections and golf course deals, Thomas had a talent for simultaneously undermining my contributions while benefiting from them. Let's table Samantha's pricing strategy for now, he'd say in meetings, only to present remarkably similar ideas as his own the following week. When I designed an innovative customer interface that increased user engagement by 30%, the company newsletter credited Thomas's team with the breakthrough. The weekly calls with my parents became exercises in emotional endurance. They'd begin with detailed updates about Elizabeth's surgical residency, her impressive procedures, the senior doctors mentoring her, her boyfriend now husband's parallel rise through the hospital ranks. When they finally asked about my work, their responses to my carefully edited achievements ranged from confused silence to thinly veiled concerns. But is it stable, dear? My mother would ask. Elizabeth's position comes with such security. My father was more direct. Sounds like a lot of hours for someone else's company. At least when Elizabeth works late, she's saving lives. Those comments stung particularly because my hours were brutal. Early mornings, late nights, and weekends sacrificed to project deadlines became my normal. While colleagues with families departed at reasonable hours, I stayed, partly from necessity and partly to prove my commitment. The tech industry's hustle culture meshed perfectly with my lifelong need to validate my choices through overachievement. The gender dynamics complicated everything. I learned to present ideas assertively enough to be taken seriously, but not so forcefully that male colleagues labeled me aggressive or difficult. I wore carefully calibrated outfits, professional enough for authority, but not so feminine as to undermine it. I kept a change of shoes under my desk, comfortable flats for marathon workdays, heels for meetings where physical stature translated subconsciously to perceived competence. Despite these exhausting calculations, I developed genuinely innovative solutions for Artemis. My data-driven approach to customer experience yielded measurable improvements in retention and satisfaction metrics. I built internal tools that streamlined processes across departments. Yet when promotion time came, I watched junior male colleagues with half my output ascend to senior positions while I received modest raises and vague feedback about developing leadership qualities. The distance ultimately proved too much for Michael and me. Our relationship, maintained through late-night calls and occasional visits, couldn't withstand the combined pressures of our demanding careers and 3 time zones. The breakup was amicable but devastating, one more sacrifice on the altar of professional ambition. "Maybe your parents are right," he said during our final conversation. "Not about your abilities, you're the most capable person I know. But about the cost. This industry takes everything and still wants more." Imposter syndrome became my constant companion. Despite objective evidence of my contributions, a voice inside whispered that perhaps I didn't belong in this world after all. Each setback amplified doubts that had been planted throughout my childhood. After particularly difficult days, I'd find myself with my finger hovering over flight booking sites, tempted by my mother's standing offer, "You can always come home." It was during this period of doubt that I first encountered Richard Kessler. At 58, Richard was an executive vice president who had built his reputation through transforming struggling divisions into profit centers. Unlike most senior leaders who remain sequestered in executive floors, Richard regularly appeared in the product development department, asking questions and genuinely listening to answers. During a company-wide presentation where team leaders shared quarterly projects, I delivered a data-heavy analysis of user engagement patterns that most attendees clearly found tedious. As eyes glazed over around the room, I noticed Richard leaning forward, fully engaged. After the meeting, he approached me directly. "Your analysis identified opportunities everyone else has missed," he said without preamble. "Walk me through how you connected these particular data points." That 15-minute conversation extended to an hour, then became regular strategy discussions. Richard became an informal mentor, offering guidance that was always direct but never condescending. He championed my ideas in meetings where they might otherwise have been overlooked and provided context for navigating the company's political landscape. "You think differently than most people here," he told me during one lunch meeting. "That's your greatest strength and your biggest challenge. Organizations claim to want innovation but instinctively resist it." When a senior product manager position opened that perfectly aligned with my skills and experience, Richard encouraged me to apply. I prepared extensively, creating a comprehensive presentation outlining my vision for the role. The interview panel seemed impressed, asking engaged questions about implementation timelines and resource requirements. Then the announcement came. The position had gone to Greg Peterson, a colleague with 2 years less experience whose primary qualification appeared to be his friendship with the department director. The explanation offered during my feedback session was that Greg had a more natural leadership presence, the professional equivalent of "he looks the part." That evening, I sat in my apartment considering whether to finally admit defeat. Perhaps my parents had been right all along. Maybe the business world truly wasn't for sensitive girls like me. I drafted an email to a graduate program in communications, the safe, suitable career my mother had always suggested. Before I could send it, my phone rang. It was Richard. "Don't you dare give up," he said without greeting. "This setback isn't about your capabilities. I've been watching you for months, and you have something rare, not just intelligence or work ethic, but vision. The system is flawed, but people with your gifts eventually break through. The question is whether you have the resilience to keep pushing until that happens." His faith rekindled my determination. I deleted the graduate school email and instead drafted a proposal for a new customer retention initiative. If the path upward was temporarily blocked, I would create value laterally until the next opportunity emerged. What I didn't know then was how soon that opportunity would come, or how dramatically it would change everything. The email from Richard arrived on a Tuesday morning in early March, cryptic and brief. "Coffee tomorrow, 7 a.m., Caledonia on Bryant Street. Important matter to discuss." By then, Richard had been absent from Artemis for nearly 3 weeks, with rumors circulating about his departure. Some claimed he'd been headhunted by a competitor, others suggested a health issue or early retirement. The company had made no official announcement, leaving a vacuum filled by speculation. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. Richard sat at a corner table, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. The perpetual furrow between his eyebrows had smoothed, though his intensity remained unchanged. "I've accepted the chairman position at Vertex Innovation Systems," he said, after minimal pleasantries. Vertex was a direct competitor to Artemis, smaller but growing rapidly with a reputation for cutting-edge development. "And I want you to join me as Vice President of Strategic Initiatives." The offer was stunning, a 3-level jump beyond my current position, with compensation that doubled my salary plus equity options. As Richard outlined his vision for transforming Vertex into an industry leader, I recognized the opportunity of a lifetime. Yet doubt crept in, my parents' voices echoing in my mind about stability and realistic expectations. "Richard, I'm incredibly honored, but I'm not sure I have the experience for a VP position." His response was immediate and firm. "You've been doing VP-level work at Artemis while being compensated as a specialist. I've watched you develop strategies that should have transformed the company if they'd been properly implemented. You're ready. The question is whether you're willing to take the risk." That night, I called my parents to discuss the opportunity. Their reaction was predictably cautious. "Leaving an established company for a smaller competitor seems reckless," my father opined, "especially for such a senior position. What if you can't handle the pressure?" My mother added, "Wouldn't it be wiser to work toward a more gradual promotion where you are? Elizabeth always says steady progress is the surest path." Speaking of Elizabeth, they quickly shifted to sharing news about her engagement party. She and Thomas had recently purchased a brownstone in Boston's Beacon Hill neighborhood, and the medical community's elite would be attending their celebration. The contrast between their excitement about her conventional success and their hesitation about my opportunity couldn't have been clearer. Despite their concerns, I accepted Richard's offer. My resignation at Artemis was met with surprising alarm, including a last-minute counteroffer that confirmed Richard's assessment they had indeed undervalued my contributions until faced with losing them entirely. 2 weeks later, I stepped into Vertex's offices as their newest executive, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. The learning curve was nearly vertical. Leadership at this level involved aspects of business I'd observed but never directly managed: board relations, investor communications, large-scale team building. I worked 16-hour days, absorbing everything while simultaneously proving my worth. My apartment became little more than a place to shower and occasionally sleep, with most nights ending past midnight at my desk. Richard proved to be both a demanding boss and a steadfast champion. His standards were exacting, his feedback unvarnished. "This projection is too conservative," he might say, or "You're missing 3 critical variables in this analysis." Yet in executive meetings, he positioned me as a key strategic voice, ensuring my recommendations received serious consideration despite my youth and newcomer status. Under our leadership, Vertex began transforming from a scrappy contender to a significant market force. I built a team that reflected my values: brilliant, driven professionals selected for their capabilities rather than their pedigrees or connections. Together, we developed products that addressed unmet needs in ways competitors hadn't imagined. Quarter by quarter, our market share grew. The personal cost was substantial. Friendships outside work became increasingly difficult to maintain. Dating was nearly impossible. The few attempts ended quickly when potential partners realized they would always come second to my professional commitments. Jennifer remained my one consistent relationship, our friendship maintained through texts and occasional video calls where we'd compare notes on our parallel journeys in different industries. 8 months into my tenure at Vertex, disaster struck. A critical security vulnerability was discovered in our flagship product, potentially exposing client data. The crisis threatened not just our growth, but our very survival, as larger competitors seized on the vulnerability in sales pitches and the tech press covered the story with barely concealed schadenfreude. During the emergency executive meeting, panic and finger-pointing dominated. The CTO blamed the development team. The chief security officer cited resource constraints. The marketing director worried about irreparable brand damage. As the accusations flew, I quietly analyzed the situation, seeing not just the problem but an opportunity within it. "We're looking at this backward," I finally said, interrupting the circular arguments. The room fell silent as I stood and walked to the whiteboard. Instead of a defensive response, we turned this into our defining moment. Over the next hour, I outlined a radical approach: complete transparency about the vulnerability, an accelerated security enhancement that would exceed industry standards, and a pioneer program inviting ethical hackers to stress test our systems with significant bounties for identified weaknesses. Rather than minimizing the situation, we would leverage it to position Vertex as the security-focused alternative in an industry often cavalier about data protection. Richard watched silently throughout my presentation. When I finished, he simply nodded and said, "Make it happen." The strategy worked beyond our most optimistic projections. Our transparent handling of the crisis built unprecedented trust with existing clients. The security enhancements genuinely improved our product. The ethical hacker program generated positive press and identified several minor vulnerabilities before they could become problems. 6 months after what should have been a company-ending disaster, our client base had grown by 28%. Throughout this period, my parents remained steadfastly focused on Elizabeth's life. She and Thomas had their perfect wedding at the Boston Public Library, followed by a 2-week honeymoon in the Maldives. When I missed the wedding due to the security crisis, my mother was understanding but disappointed. "Elizabeth really wanted her sister there on her special day," she sighed. "I suppose your work emergency couldn't be helped." The irony that I was literally saving a multi-million-dollar company while they thought I was handling some minor office crisis wasn't lost on me. Yet something had changed in my reaction to their dismissal. Where once there had been hurt and a desperate need for validation, I now felt a growing sense of independence from their approval. My worth was being proven daily in the real world, measured in concrete results rather than parental recognition. Richard and I developed a unique working relationship during this period. Our late-night strategy sessions became legendary within the company, with junior staff occasionally finding us still in the conference room at dawn, whiteboards filled with diagrams and projections. He pushed me intellectually harder than anyone ever had, challenging assumptions and demanding precision in thinking. In return, I brought fresh perspectives that helped break through conventional industry limitations. "You have the most valuable quality in business," he told me after we secured a major client thought to be unattainable. "You see possibilities where others see only constraints." As Vertex continued its upward trajectory, competitors took notice. Several tried recruiting me with impressive offers. Others attempted to undermine my position through industry gossip, questioning my qualifications, tactics painfully reminiscent of my childhood experiences. Through it all, Richard's confidence in me never wavered, providing the foundation I needed to weather both success and challenge. What neither of us anticipated was how quickly the next phase of our journey would arrive, or the personal reckoning it would precipitate for both me and my family. The call came on a Thursday evening as I was reviewing quarterly projections in my office. Richard's assistant, sounding uncharacteristically flustered, asked me to come to the hospital immediately. Richard had collapsed during a board meeting and been rushed to cardiac care. By the time I arrived, he was stabilized, but the diagnosis was serious, a significant heart attack requiring immediate intervention. They're recommending triple bypass surgery, his wife Sandra explained, her normally composed demeanor strained with worry, and complete work restriction for at least 3 months afterward. The implications were enormous. As chairman, Richard was the driving force behind Vertex's transformation and the primary liaison with our investors. His sudden absence created a leadership vacuum at a critical growth phase. That night, after ensuring Sandra had family support, I returned to the office and worked until morning, developing a comprehensive transition plan to maintain stability during Richard's recovery. The next weeks passed in a blur of 18-hour days as I juggled my responsibilities while covering many of Richard's. Investor calls, strategic partnerships, board communications all fell to me alongside my existing portfolio. The pressure was immense, but strangely energizing. Each successfully navigated challenge built my confidence and expanded my capabilities. Richard's recovery progressed well, but his perspective had shifted. During my hospital visits, our conversations gradually moved from operational concerns to larger questions about the company's future. A month after his surgery, during a quiet moment when Sandra had stepped out, he broached the subject directly. "I'm not coming back as chairman," he said, watching me carefully. "At least not in an operational capacity." The news shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. "The company needs your leadership," I protested. "We can adjust workload, bring in additional support." "Samantha," he interrupted gently, "this health scare has clarified my priorities. I'm 61 years old. I've built and sold 3 companies. What I haven't done is watch my grandchildren grow up or travel with Sandra while we're both healthy enough to enjoy it." He leaned forward, his gaze intense despite his weakened state. "Besides, Vertex doesn't need me anymore. It needs you." 2 days later, I received formal notice of an emergency board meeting to discuss succession planning. Though I'd been effectively running much of the company during Richard's absence, the prospect of officially stepping into leadership triggered all my old insecurities. The board included several traditional business figures who had accepted me as Richard's protege, but might balk at endorsing me as a successor. The meeting was scheduled at Richard entered last, noticeably thinner, but carrying himself with his customary authority. After brief medical updates, he moved directly to the agenda's purpose. "Gentlemen, ladies, I've brought you here to announce my decision to step back from operational leadership of Vertex." He outlined his medical situation and his intention to move to an advisory role. "This company is positioned for extraordinary growth with the right leadership, and fortunately, that leadership is already in place." What followed was a comprehensive assessment of my contributions to Vertex that left me fighting to maintain professional composure. Richard detailed initiatives I'd spearheaded, challenges I'd overcome, and the cultural transformation I'd helped create. His conclusion was unequivocal. "Samantha Warren is not just the logical choice to lead Vertex forward. She is the only choice if we're serious about becoming an industry leader." In 2 years, she has demonstrated more strategic vision and operational excellence than most executives achieve in a decade. I couldn't be prouder if she were my own son. The traditional phrase, a linguistic remnant from business's male-dominated history, carried extraordinary emotional weight coming from Richard. In that moment, he offered what my father never had, complete, unqualified belief in my capabilities and vision. The room's reaction was mixed. Several board members nodded in agreement. Others looked skeptical. Bradford Mills, our most conservative investor, voiced the obvious concern. While Ms. Warren's contributions are undeniable, CEO is a significant leap. She's remarkably young, and the market might question whether she has the necessary experience. Richard began to respond, but I gently interrupted. If I may address that directly? At his nod, I stood and moved to the front of the room. For the next 40 minutes, I presented a comprehensive vision for Vertex's future not as Richard's successor, but as a leader with my own distinct perspective. I outlined strategies for expanding our market position, developing new product verticals, and building institutional culture that would attract and retain exceptional talent. I addressed potential challenges directly, demonstrating contingency planning and risk mitigation approaches. I concluded with financial projections that were ambitious, but meticulously supported by data and trend analysis. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment before conversation erupted, questions coming rapidly from all directions. I answered each with confidence backed by thorough knowledge of every aspect of our business. As the discussion progressed, the skepticism gradually transformed into engaged strategic dialogue. The final vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. At 29, I became one of the youngest CEOs in the technology sector and one of the few women leading a company of Vertex's size. The press conference announcing the transition was scheduled for the following week, giving us time to prepare markets and key clients for the leadership change. That evening, alone in my apartment, I called my parents with the news I'd been waiting my entire career to share. My father answered, sounding distracted. "Dad, I have some pretty big news to share." "Can it wait, Samantha? We're just heading out to a dinner celebrating Elizabeth's appointment as chief resident. Youngest in the program's history, you know." The familiar sting of dismissal was followed by an unfamiliar sense of calm detachment. "I've been appointed CEO of Vertex," I said simply. A pause, then skepticism. "CEO? Of the entire company? Are you sure you understood correctly?" "Yes, Dad. The entire company. The board voted today." "Well, that's unexpected. Isn't that a lot of responsibility? Are you sure you're ready for something so demanding?" My mother took the phone. "Darling, that sounds very impressive, though I'm not entirely sure what it means in practical terms. Will you have to work even more hours? That seems unsustainable." They promised to call back later to hear all about it, but the call never came. By the next morning, I was too immersed in transition planning to notice. The press conference announcing my appointment generated significant industry attention, with technology publications analyzing the unexpected leadership change from every angle. Most coverage focused on my age and gender rather than my qualifications, with headlines like "Vertex Gambles on Millennial Female CEO" and "Can Warren Fill Kessler's Shoes?" I threw myself into proving the skeptics wrong, working with a focus and intensity that surprised even those who knew me well. Jennifer, who had recently taken a senior position at a clean energy startup in Seattle, flew in for a weekend to celebrate my promotion and express concern about my punishing schedule. "You've achieved what everyone said you couldn't," she reminded me over dinner at my apartment, the first proper meal I'd had there in weeks. "But if you burn out in the process, what's the point?" Her visit prompted me to create at least some semblance of personal life alongside my professional responsibilities. I joined a weekend hiking group where I met Alan Mercer, an architectural engineer whose calm confidence and genuine interest in my work was refreshingly different from previous relationships. Our dating pattern was unconventional. Sometimes weeks passed between meetings, but he understood my commitment to Vertex without resentment. My first year as CEO brought both remarkable successes and painful lessons. We exceeded growth projections by 22%, successfully launched 2 new product lines, and completed a strategic acquisition that expanded our client base. We also weathered a failed partnership, navigated a challenging product delay, and managed the departure of 2 executive team members who struggled with my leadership style. Through it all, Richard provided invaluable counsel from his reduced role, available when needed but careful never to undermine my authority. His mentorship evolved into a genuine friendship as he balanced his advisory position with his new priorities of family time and travel. Throughout this transformative period, my relationship with my parents remained strained and distant. They occasionally called with updates about Elizabeth's life and accomplishments, but showed minimal interest in my new role beyond superficial inquiries. Until, quite suddenly, everything changed. The Forbes profile wasn't my idea. Our PR director had lobbied for months to get me to agree to a feature, arguing that positive media coverage would benefit the company beyond just stroking my ego. When the magazine requested an interview for their Innovators Reshaping Business issue, I finally relented. The resulting article, The Quiet Revolutionary: How Samantha Warren is Transforming Tech Leadership, included a 4-page spread with professional photos and a detailed account of Vertex's transformation under my guidance. I thought little of it until my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Everyone at the club is talking about your magazine article. The Hendersons showed us a copy. Why didn't you tell us about this? Calling you later." The call, when it came, revealed a startling shift in my parents' perception. Suddenly, they were full of questions about my work and eager to share that their friends were impressed by my accomplishments. My father mentioned proudly that his golf partner's son worked in venture capital and had heard very positive things about Vertex's management. "We always knew you were destined for success, darling," my mother said, her revisionist history taking shape in real time. "You were always so determined, even as a little girl." Their newfound interest coincided with Elizabeth facing her first significant professional setback. The chief resident position she'd secured had become a political minefield as hospital administration changes led to program restructuring. Suddenly, the golden child was experiencing workplace politics and organizational challenges I'd navigated for years. 2 weeks after the Forbes article, my parents announced they'd be visiting San Francisco and wanted to see my office. "We should really understand more about what our CEO daughter does," my father said with awkward joviality that couldn't mask the years of dismissal. Their visit to Vertex headquarters was surreal. Employees who had heard countless stories about my family treated them with curious respect as I led them through our open-concept workspace. My mother commented on the lovely modern furniture, while my father asked surface-level questions about our business model, clearly trying to piece together what exactly had made his overlooked daughter so suddenly significant. The most revealing moment came when Richard stopped by my office during their tour. Upon introduction, my father straightened his posture and adopted the deferential tone he typically reserved for hospital administrators. "Richard, we're so grateful for the opportunities you've given Samantha," he said, shaking hands vigorously. Richard's response was polite but pointed. "I didn't give Samantha opportunities, Dr. Warren. I simply recognized capabilities that were already there. Your daughter has created her own success through extraordinary vision and determination. Vertex is fortunate to have her leadership." The comment landed like a precise surgical strike. My father's expression flickered between confusion and discomfort as he processed hearing another man one he clearly respected directly contradict his perception of his own daughter. That evening, we met for dinner at an upscale restaurant where my parents had insisted on treating me to celebrate your success. Elizabeth joined us, having flown in specifically for the occasion, bringing a complexity to the family dynamic that had been absent for years. As we settled into our appetizers, my mother launched into what she clearly thought was a complimentary observation. "We were looking at your old high school projects yesterday, Samantha. Who would have thought those little business plans would lead to all this? We always worried you were setting yourself up for disappointment." Something about the casual dismissal of my lifelong passion reframed as cute childhood projects rather than early manifestations of genuine talent broke through the professional composure I'd maintained. 29 years of seeking validation suddenly crystallized into clarity. They weren't little business plans, Mom, I said quietly. They were the beginning of the career you and Dad spent years telling me was unrealistic and unsuitable. The same career that you're suddenly proud of now that other people have validated it. The table fell silent. My father adjusted his glasses, his nervous habit when conversations turned uncomfortable. Now, Samantha, that's not it. Yet you never worried about the challenges Elizabeth would face in medicine, I countered. Her path received unconditional support while mine was treated as a phase to outgrow. My mother's eyes widened. We supported you. We paid for your business school tuition. Yes, while constantly comparing it unfavorably to Elizabeth's medical education and reminding me I could come home when it didn't work out. The words flowed now, years of carefully contained hurt finding expression. Every achievement of mine was acknowledged with minimal interest before conversation returned to Elizabeth's latest triumph. Every setback was treated as confirmation I'd chosen the wrong path. I turned to Elizabeth, softening slightly. This isn't about you. You deserved every celebration and all the support they gave you. But I deserved it too. To my surprise, Elizabeth reached across the table and took my hand. You're right, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I always knew it, but it was easier to accept the praise than question it. The pressure of being the successful one came with its own burden. Any failure felt catastrophic because perfection was the baseline expectation. What you've accomplished despite their doubt is far more impressive than what I did with their constant affirmation. My parents looked genuinely shocked, first at my confrontation and now at Elizabeth's support. My father attempted to recover with defensive justification. We always wanted what was best for both our daughters. If we seemed more confident about Elizabeth's path, it's because medicine has a clear trajectory. Business is unpredictable, especially for women. That's precisely the point, Harold, came a voice from behind us. Richard and Sandra had entered the restaurant and spotted our table. Success in uncertain environments requires greater courage and vision, not less support. After brief introductions, my parents insisted Richard and Sandra join us for dessert, eager, I suspected, to demonstrate their sudden appreciation for my career. The conversation that followed was revelatory, as Richard shared stories of my leadership that my parents had never bothered to ask about. The security crisis response alone would have established Samantha as an exceptional leader, he told them, describing in detail the strategy that had saved the company. But it's her consistent ability to transform challenges into opportunities that truly sets her apart. Watching my father's face as another man praised the daughter he had underestimated was a complex emotional experience. There was growing recognition, certainly, but also something that looked surprisingly like grief, perhaps, for the relationship we might have had if he'd recognized my potential earlier. My mother, always quicker to adapt to social currents, attempted to position herself as my longtime champion. We always told Samantha she could achieve anything she set her mind to, she insisted, her revisionist history expanding further. Actually, Catherine, Elizabeth interjected gently, you told her she should consider event planning because business might be too aggressive for her sensitive nature. As the evening concluded, the foundations of our family dynamic had been irrevocably altered. No single conversation could heal decades of dismissal, but truth had finally pierced the carefully maintained fiction of equal support and recognition. The drive back to my apartment was quiet, my parents subdued by revelations they were still processing. At my door, my father attempted an awkward half-apology. Perhaps we didn't fully appreciate your direction, he conceded, stopping well short of acknowledging the deeper pattern. We're proud of you now, of course. That's the problem, Dad, I replied, tired but finally free of the need for their validation. You're proud because Forbes and Richard and your country club friends are impressed. I needed you to believe in me before external validation made it safe to do so. My mother hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. Whether they were tears of genuine regret or simply emotional response to an uncomfortable situation remained unclear. What was clear was that something fundamental had shifted, not just in how they saw me, but in how I saw myself in relation to them. Elizabeth stayed behind after they left, and we talked late into the night about the complex family system we'd both been shaped by. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you earlier," she said as we shared the last of a bottle of wine. "I think I was afraid that if they stopped focusing on my successes, they'd see my flaws too." "We both deserved better," I told her. "You deserve the right to fail sometimes without catastrophic disappointment. I deserved recognition of my potential along with my limitations." As she left for her hotel, Elizabeth hugged me with an openness we hadn't shared since childhood. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm not just proud of you because you're successful. I'm proud of you because you remained true to yourself when no one believed you should." That night, lying awake processing the emotional earthquake of the evening, I realized that the approval I had sought for so long no longer held the power it once did. Whether my parents truly changed their perception or simply adjusted to external validation of my path was, in the end, less important than my own liberation from the need for their approval. The validation that mattered most had come from within, from the quiet certainty that had guided me from those first business plans sketched by a determined teenager to the boardroom where I now shaped the future of a growing company. A year passed, bringing changes to both Vertex and my personal landscape. Under my leadership, the company continued its upward trajectory, securing major contracts and expanding our market presence beyond initial projections. We launched a groundbreaking product line that industry analysts described as redefining the parameters of what's possible in data security integration. Our workforce doubled, necessitating a move to larger offices with views of the Bay Bridge and the constant reminder of how far we'd come. Alongside our technical innovations, I implemented a company-wide mentorship program specifically designed to support young women entering the technology sector. The Elevation Initiative, as we called it, paired promising female employees with senior leaders for structured development and provided educational stipends, networking opportunities, and clear advancement pathways. The program reflected lessons from my own journey, creating the support structure I had lacked while recognizing that determination alone shouldn't determine who succeeds. The next generation shouldn't have to work twice as hard for half the recognition, I explained during the program's launch event. Talent deserves nurturing regardless of its package. My relationship with my parents evolved into something more honest, if occasionally uncomfortable. Our conversations no longer centered exclusively on Elizabeth's life, though old habits occasionally resurfaced. My father made awkward but genuine attempts to understand my work, reading industry publications and sending articles he thought might interest me. My mother's approach was more practical. She began introducing me to the children of her friends who worked in technology or finance, building connections she once would have discouraged. Their efforts were imperfect but meaningful, small gestures of reconciliation that acknowledged past dismissals without explicitly addressing them. For Christmas, my father sent a first edition of a business biography I had loved as a teenager, inscribed simply, "Your path, your wisdom. Proud of you, Dad." The book had been on my childhood bookshelf. He must have noticed it during my high school years when I thought no one was paying attention. Elizabeth and I developed a closer relationship without the competitive dynamic that had defined our earlier interactions. As she navigated her own professional challenges, she sometimes called for advice on organizational politics or conflict management, areas where my experience now exceeded hers. These role reversals brought a healing balance to our sisterhood. "I used to think success meant never making mistakes," she confided during one late-night call. "Now I realize it's about having the resilience to learn from them." Richard's mentorship evolved into a treasured friendship. Though he had stepped back from operational involvement at Vertex, we maintained regular contact through monthly dinners where conversation ranged from business strategy to philosophy to family dynamics. His health improved steadily, allowing him and Sandra to pursue their delayed travel dreams while he maintained his advisory role. The true measure of leadership isn't what happens while you're at the helm, he told me over dinner celebrating Vertex's most successful quarter to date. It's whether what you've built continues to thrive when you step away. Jennifer's prediction about my workaholic tendencies proved partially correct. I still worked intensely, but had learned to create boundaries that preserve space for personal fulfillment. My relationship with Alan deepened gradually, both of us recognizing that meaningful connection required genuine presence, not just shared calendars. We established a rule that work devices stayed outside the bedroom and dedicated weekend mornings to hiking coastal trails without discussion of professional matters. The Thanksgiving following my parents' San Francisco visit marked a significant shift in family dynamics. For the first time, they traveled to me rather than expecting my return to Boston. I hosted dinner in my apartment, with Elizabeth and Thomas flying in as well. The gathering felt tentative initially, everyone navigating unfamiliar emotional territory. After dinner, my father asked to see my home office, a request that would have seemed insignificant if not for our history. As he examined the professional awards displayed alongside personal mementos, he paused at a framed business plan I had created at 15. "I remember this," he said quietly. "You presented it to me, and I dismissed it." I finished when he hesitated. He nodded, removing his glasses to clean them unnecessarily. "I was wrong, Samantha. Not just about your capabilities, but about what you needed from me. I mistook protection for support." "What do you mean?" "I thought discouraging you from business was protecting you from disappointment." Elizabeth's path seemed safer, established, respected, with clear milestones. "Your ambitions seemed so much more vulnerable to failure." He replaced his glasses, finally meeting my eyes directly. "I never considered that what you needed wasn't protection from failure, but support through it." The acknowledgement wasn't a complete healing, but it was a beginning, the first genuine recognition that the pain had been real and the dismissal unjustified. My mother's approach to reconciliation remained more indirect, expressing through actions what she struggled to articulate in words. She had compiled a scrapbook of my media coverage and professional accomplishments, presented awkwardly but with obvious care. "I may not understand everything you do," she admitted, "but I see how significant it is." During that visit, I witnessed something I'd never expected: my parents taking genuine interest in both daughters' lives with equal engagement. Questions about my work carried the same weight as inquiries about Elizabeth's medical practice. Holiday photos featured both our achievements displayed with parallel pride. The experience reinforced a truth I had been gradually internalizing: validation from others, even parents, is ultimately less crucial than self-belief sustained through action. The approval I had desperately sought throughout childhood had arrived too late to form my foundation. That foundation had been built through countless moments of choosing my path despite discouragement. On New Year's Eve, as Alan and I hosted friends including Jennifer and her new partner, Richard and Sandra, and several Vertex colleagues who had become chosen family, I reflected on the journey from that determined teenager to the woman who now led a thriving company. The metrics of success had changed dramatically. Where once I sought external validation through achievement, I now measure growth through impact on my company, my industry, and especially on young women following similar paths. Elizabeth called at midnight, her voice carrying across the country as fireworks illuminated the San Francisco sky. "I've been thinking about something Mom said when we were kids," she shared after New Year wishes. "Remember how she always told us, 'Be careful what you wish for'? I think she meant it as caution, but I've realized it's actually powerful what we persistently wish for, work toward, and believe in despite obstacles. We often achieve." Her observation crystallized the wisdom I'd gained through years of pursuing dreams despite dismissal. Success wasn't about proving my parents wrong, though that satisfaction remained undeniably sweet. It was about proving myself right. The voice that had whispered, "You can do this," when everyone said otherwise, hadn't been delusion, but authentic recognition of capacities others couldn't see. As midnight passed and conversation flowed around me, I stepped onto my balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The city lights mirrored the stars above, both representing possibilities, some already realized, others still waiting. The path forward would bring new challenges, certainly, but I would face them without the weight of seeking external validation that had complicated earlier struggles. What would you do differently if you knew that validation from others is a poor substitute for belief in yourself? Have you ever had someone dismiss your dreams only to change their perspective when success arrived? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and personal triumph. And remember, the most powerful validation isn't the kind that comes after success proves others wrong, but the kind you give yourself when everyone else doubts your path. Thank you for listening to my story today.